The sun had no mercy in West Texas. It never did, not in July, not in 1874, and certainly not on the cracked earth of the Caine homestead, where the soil had given up drinking 2 summers ago and the grass had gone the color of old bone. The windmill stood still. The creek had narrowed to a whisper. Even the dust seemed tired of moving. Eliza Caine was not tired. She was on her knees in the vegetable patch behind the house, coaxing life from ground that had nearly forgotten how to give it, when she heard hoofbeats. Not the lazy amble of a neighbor or the stumbling trot of her father's aging mare. These were deliberate hoofbeats, heavy, evenly spaced, the kind that belonged to a horse that had never been told no. She stood, wiped her hands on her canvas work apron, and shielded her eyes against the white afternoon glare. Cole Hargrove. Even at a distance, there was no mistaking him. 6.5 feet of sun-darkened rancher, sitting a black stallion like he had been carved there by the same forces that shaped the canyon walls. He wore no hat brim tilted in greeting. He offered no wave. He simply rode toward the house with the unhurried certainty of a man who had already decided how the day would end. Eliza did not move from where she stood. She had grown up hearing his name spoken in 2 tones, her father's bitter growl and the hushed reverence of everyone else. Cole Hargrove, who owned 40,000 acres of the richest grazing land in the territory. Cole Hargrove, whose cattle operation made other ranchers look like boys playing with tin toys. Cole Hargrove, who had, according to her father, stolen the eastern water rights through a crooked land deal 15 years ago and never lost a night's sleep over it. She had never spoken to the man directly. She had seen him once, at the Rim Rock cattle auction 3 years prior, standing at the edge of the crowd like a thundercloud that hadn't decided where to strike. He dismounted at the fence post without invitation and tied his horse with one practiced loop. "Miss Caine," he said. His voice was low and flat, the way the land was flat, deceptively so, with depths that dropped without warning. "Mr. Hargrove." She kept her chin level. "My father is inside." "I know where your father is." He looked at her steadily. "It's you I came to speak with." Inside the house, she placed 2 tin cups of water on the table, not as hospitality, but as something to do with her hands. Cole Hargrove sat across from her, hat resting on one knee, and he did not waste time on weather or pleasantries. That, she would later think, was the only honest thing about his proposal. "Your father owes Luther Vane $1,100, he said. "Vane's note comes due in 30 days. Your father doesn't have 30 cents. He paused. "He's going to lose this land." Eliza's jaw tightened. She said nothing. "I'll pay the debt in full," Cole continued. "Clear the note entirely. Your father stays on this property until he dies in his own bed. The land transfers to me on paper, but he'll never be put off it." The tin cup was cold in her hands. "And what do you want in return?" He looked at her without blinking. "I want you to marry me." The words landed like a stone dropped into still water, the ripples immediate and spreading. Eliza set down the cup very carefully. "You want to marry me," she repeated, not a question, a recitation as though hearing it in her own voice might make it make sense. "I need a capable woman to manage the household at Hargrove Ranch. My operation is large. The domestic side has gone unmanaged for years." He said it the way a man discusses buying a piece of equipment. "You're capable. I've seen how you've kept this place running while your father's been declining. You won't be mistreated. You'll have a roof, meals, and stability." "You mean I'll be your servant?" Something shifted in his expression, not guilt, not quite. "I mean you'll be my wife." "Those aren't the same thing." She held his gaze, "and you know it." A long silence stretched between them. Outside, the windmill creaked once in a rare breath of wind, then went still again. "Name your condition," he said finally. She had not expected that. She steadied herself. "I will not be hidden away. I will not be spoken to like hired help. I am to be treated with the same respect you would give any person working alongside you, not beneath you." Cole Hargrove studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded once as if closing a ledger. "Agreed," he said. She did not believe him, but she believed Luther Vane. And she believed what 30 days meant for a man as broken as her father. Her father, when she told him, did not argue. He sat in his chair by the cold fireplace, smaller than she ever remembered him, and looked at his weathered hands. "It's a good solution, Eliza," he said quietly. "Papa, I'm tired." His voice carried no fight left in it. "I'm sorry, girl, I'm just so tired." She left the room before he could see her face. That evening, Eliza went to find me in the back of the house, old me, who had raised her after her mother passed, who smelled of dried lavender and always knew when to speak and when to simply hold. Eliza sat on the edge of the narrow cot and pressed her face against the old woman's shoulder and did not cry for long, because there wasn't time anymore for long crying. Me held her, rocked her just slightly. "You take what you need," me whispered, "and you take it with your head up." When Eliza finally stood to leave, me pressed a small bundle into her hands, cloth wrapped carefully, tied with a piece of feed string, warm and soft from being held close. Eliza tucked it under her arm without a word. She did not look at it, not yet. The wedding was held 4 days later in the Rimrock County Clerk's office, with Hector the ranch hand and a courthouse secretary as witnesses. There were no flowers, no music. Cole signed first, his name large and unhesitating across the paper. Eliza signed beneath it. Her hand was perfectly steady. Afterward, Cole held the door open for her, the first and only courteous gesture of the day. She walked through it into the blinding afternoon light, and the dust closed around them both, and the road back to Hargrove Ranch was very long and very quiet. She held the bundle in her lap the entire ride, and said nothing at all. Hargrove Ranch did not welcome her. It simply absorbed her, the way the Texas earth absorbed everything, indifferently, without ceremony. The main house was large and dust-thick, full of heavy furniture that had not been rearranged in years and curtains that had forgotten what color they once were. It was a house that had been maintained but never inhabited, kept but never loved. Eliza noticed all of it in the first 10 minutes. By the first morning she had already begun to change it. She was up before the sun. Cole, descending the stairs at 5 o'clock expecting an empty kitchen, found her instead at the wood stove with a fire already burning, the supply ledger open on the table beside a cup of black coffee she had made for herself, and without thinking, one she had made for him. He stopped in the doorway. She did not look up from the ledger. "Your grain account is 3 months behind on reconciliation. You've been overcharged by the Caldwell Feed Store, $11 across 4 invoices. I've marked the pages." Cole looked at the coffee, then at her. He sat down, pulled the cup toward him, and said nothing, but he drank it. By the end of the first week, she had reorganized the household supply system, written 3 letters of correction to vendors in town, and personally treated a roan mare that Cole's ranch hands had quietly given up on, poulticing the infected foreleg twice daily, talking low and steady to the animal the way her father had taught her, until the horse stopped rolling her eyes in fear and began to lean into Eliza's hand. Hector, Cole's head ranch hand, a broad, warm-faced man with a gray-streaked mustache, watched her work on that horse for a long while one afternoon before removing his hat. "Mrs. Hargrove," he said carefully, "that mare's had 3 men try to doctor her this past month." "I know," Eliza said, not unkindly. She didn't trust them. Hector put his hat back on, nodded slowly, and walked away with a different kind of respect in his eyes than he'd arrived with. Cole watched all of this. He said very little, but he watched. It was on the 9th day that she found Tamaz. She had gone to the barn at mid-morning to check on the roan mare and heard, from behind a stack of hay bales in the far corner, the unmistakable sound of a child trying very hard not to be heard. She did not call out or move quickly. She simply settled herself on a nearby crate and waited. After a long pause, a pair of dark eyes appeared over the top of a hay bale. A boy, 10 years old at most, small for his age, wearing clothes slightly too large that had nonetheless been recently washed and mended. "I'm not supposed to be seen," he informed her solemnly. "I can see that," she said. "Are you hungry?" He was. His name was Tamaz. Over a plate of cornbread and beans at the kitchen table, the story came in pieces, orphaned, drifting, found half-starved on the south pasture by Hector 8 months ago. Cole had said nothing official. He had simply told Hector to give the boy a cot in the hands' quarters, arranged for a retired schoolteacher in town to ride out twice a week, and left a standing instruction that Tomás was to eat whatever was in the kitchen whenever he needed it. No announcement. No credit taken. Just a child, quietly kept safe. Eliza thought about this for a long time after Tomás ran back to the barn. That evening Cole returned from the North Range to find her in the barn, the recovered mare calm beside her, a small book open in her lap. She was reading aloud, slowly, deliberately, the way one reads to someone still learning. She looked up when she heard his boots on the barn floor and closed the book quickly. He had caught a glimpse, a child's primer. The boy, he asked. She lifted her chin. He's further along than the schoolteacher knows. He just needs someone to practice with. Cole looked at her for a moment with an expression she couldn't quite name. Then he turned and walked back to the house without another word. But he didn't tell her to stop. The following week brought Vera Langston. She arrived mid-afternoon in a spotless buckboard with ribbon-trimmed parasol and a smile sharp enough to cut glass. Eliza was at the fence line helping Hector assess a section of damaged post when Vera swept past her as though she were part of the scenery. "Cole, darling," Vera called toward the house. Then, turning back with deliberate sweetness, "You must be the Caine girl. What a novelty, a ranch wife who does fence work. Cole always did have peculiar taste." Cole appeared on the porch. His eyes moved once from Vera to Eliza and something settled in his jaw. "Vera." His voice was flat. "I don't recall sending an invitation." Vera laughed lightly. "I came to welcome your arrangement, shall we say, to the community." "It's a marriage," Cole said, "and you'll address her as Mrs. Hargrove." He held the gate open, not in welcome. "Ride safe back to town." Vera's smile did not waver, but her eyes did. She left. Eliza turned back to the fence post, but her hands, she noticed, had gone still. 3 nights later the storm came. It rolled in off the plain without warning, black and electric, the kind of storm that moved cattle before the thunder even arrived. By midnight, the south herd had broken through a weak section of fence and scattered into the canyon country beyond the eastern boundary. Eliza was already pulling on her boots when Hector knocked. She knew that canyon. Every draw, every hidden pass, every shelf of rock where frightened cattle would bunch and turn. It had been Caine land once. Her father had walked her through every inch of it when she was small, pressing the landscape into her memory like a map into soft wax. She led the crew through the darkness without hesitation, through the hidden pass, around the blind drop, into the wide draw where the cattle had gathered in a stamping, rolling mass. Hector worked beside her. 3 hours in the rain. 41 head brought back safe. When they finally rode back into the ranch yard, Cole was waiting by the gate, lantern in hand. His eyes moved over her, soaked through, mud-spattered, exhausted, and something in his face rearranged itself. Not gratitude, exactly. Not yet. Something quieter than that. Something that had no name for a man who had spent 15 years making sure he didn't need anyone. They stood in the thin lantern light, rain still ticking on the barn roof overhead. He did not say thank you, but he took the reins of her horse from her hands himself, and he stood there holding them long after she had walked inside. Hector found Eliza the next morning, not at the ledger or the fence line, but kneeling in the east pasture with her palm pressed flat against the earth, her shoulders shaking with something she had no language for. He watched from a distance, said nothing, but he was worried. And he was not wrong to be. Cole Hargrove did not handle the truth gently. When Eliza told him, standing in the kitchen doorway, hands clasped in front of her, voice steady as the horizon, he said nothing for a long time. He set down the coffee cup. He looked at the wall. Then he walked out of the house, mounted his horse, and rode north into the open range until the ranch buildings disappeared behind him entirely. He stayed gone for 2 days. The hands moved carefully around Eliza during those 2 days, the way men move around something they respect but don't fully understand. Hector brought her meals without comment. Tomás, sensing the weight in the air without knowing its source, stayed close to her side, trailing her through the morning chores like a small, faithful shadow. On the second evening, Tamaz found Cole sitting alone on the flat rock above the North Creek, staring at nothing in particular. The boy climbed up beside him uninvited, as children do, without apology, and sat quietly for a while before speaking. "Miss Eliza taught me 3 new words today," he said. Cole said nothing. "She said a good person makes the people around them bigger," Tamaz continued seriously, "not smaller." He picked at the rock with one finger. "I think that's the truest thing anybody ever told me." Cole looked at the boy for a long moment, at the small, earnest face, at the mended collar of the too-large shirt. He rode back to the ranch before dark. He found Eliza on the porch, the wrapped bundle open in her lap at last, tiny garments, hand-sewn with the careful, determined stitching of someone who had worked by poor lamplight for months, in secret, in hope. She did not hide it when she heard his boots on the steps. She looked up at him directly, the way she always did, without flinching. He sat down in the other chair, not close, but present. "I had a wife," he said. His voice was low and stripped of everything it usually carried, the authority, the distance, the iron. 7 years ago, her name was Ruth. He stopped, started again. "She died in childbed, the baby with her." He looked at his hands. "A boy. We were going to call him James." The night insects filled the silence between them. "I built everything after that," he continued. "Every acre, every head of cattle, every dollar, I built it because I needed somewhere to put what I couldn't carry anymore." He exhaled slowly. "And when your father's land came into reach, I told myself it was strategy, that marrying you was practical, useful." He shook his head. "I knew it was punishment. I just didn't want to admit who I was punishing." Eliza was quiet for a long time. "I was going to tell you," she said finally. "I wanted to wait until I knew, until I was certain you weren't the man I was afraid you were." She smoothed a small hand-sewn gown across her knee. "I'm still not entirely certain." "That's fair," he said. "I don't need saving, Cole." She said his name for the first time without formality, and it landed differently than either of them expected. "I need a partner, someone who looks at this child and sees a person worth fighting for, not a problem to manage, not a secret to be ashamed of." Her eyes were steady and serious. "Can you be that?" He looked at the tiny garment in her hands, at the months of quiet, secret hope stitched into every seam. "I don't know yet," he said honestly, "but I'd like to find out." It was not a grand declaration. It was not the kind of answer that arrives on a white horse. But it was true, and Eliza had learned in 30 hard years of West Texas living that truth was worth more than spectacle. She nodded once, and that was enough to begin. Cole prepared quietly, the way he did everything that mattered. He moved Eliza's belongings from the far wing to a room near the center of the house, where the morning light came through the east window and the floorboards were warm. He sent to San Antonio for a proper catalog, and sat at the kitchen table one afternoon with Tamaz. The two of them bent seriously over the pages, debating the merits of various cradles with the gravity of a land negotiation. He brought me from the Caine homestead her rocking chair, her dried lavender bundles, her entire small world loaded into a wagon, and gave her the sunny room off the kitchen without being asked. Rupert Caine came once in the weeks that followed. He was thinner, steadier, leaning on a cedar walking stick Cole had sent over without a note attached. He came up the road slowly and stood at the fence line looking toward the porch, where his daughter sat in the afternoon light, her hands resting in her lap. He saw Cole come through the screen door and lower himself into the chair beside her, not touching, just near, just present. Rupert Caine stood at that fence for a long while. Then he turned around and walked back down the road, and the tears on his face were not the kind that needed an audience. Vera Langston made her final attempt on a Tuesday. She rode into Rim Rock and spent an afternoon at the saloon, her voice carrying across the room with the careful projection of a woman who wants to be overheard. The Caine girl's child wasn't Cole's, she said. He'd been made a fool. The whole county knew it. Cole walked into that saloon on Wednesday morning. He stood at the bar, turned to face the room, and let the silence settle before he spoke. "That child will carry the Hargrove name," he said. "Anyone with a grievance about that is welcome to bring it to me directly." He looked around the room slowly. Nobody moved. Then Hector from his corner table began to clap. Slow and deliberate. One by one the room followed, until the sound filled the low-ceilinged space and Vera Langston was already at the door. She did not come back. Clara Me Hargrove arrived at dawn on a Thursday in late October, announced by a cry so clear and strong it startled the horses in the near corral. Cole sat outside the bedroom door the entire night, back against the wall, hat in his hands, not moving. When the baby's voice first filled the house, he bowed his head. And for the first time in 7 years, Cole Hargrove wept not from grief, but from something he had nearly forgotten the shape of. Something that had been waiting, patient as the land, for him to be ready to hold it. Me appeared in the doorway some time later, infant Clara wrapped in the hand-sewn gown, and placed her carefully into his arms without a word. He held the baby the way a man holds something he never expected to be trusted with, absolutely still, barely breathing, terrified and grateful in equal measure. Eliza named her Clara Me Hargrove. Clara for the dawn that broke the morning she arrived. Me for the woman who had carried the secret with love and kept the hope alive when hope was all there was. The first good rain in 3 years came that same week. It rolled in soft and steady from the southwest, the kind of rain the land drinks slowly, all the way down. The creek filled. The grass, within days, began to remember green. The two ranches, Hargrove and Caine, combined now under a single deed, stretched together into the distance like a sentence finally completed. Cole stood at the east fence at sunrise. Infant Clara pressed against his chest inside his open coat, her small face turned toward the pale morning sky. He heard Eliza's boots on the wet grass before he saw her. She came to stand beside him and took his arm without ceremony, the way a person takes hold of something they have decided to keep. He looked down at her, at the land, at the child. "I came here to take something from you," he said quietly. She leaned her head briefly against his shoulder, then looked back out at the wide, rain-cleaned morning. "You ended up giving me everything," she said. The sun lifted fully over the canyon rim. Clara made a small sound against his chest. Not a cry, just a breath, just the effortless announcement of someone who has arrived exactly where she belongs. Cole Hargrove, giant of a man, cattle king of West Texas, enemy turned husband turned father, looked out over the living land and felt, for the first time in longer than he could remember, the particular, irreplaceable weight of being home.